It's okay, Jada. I'm right here.
Just breathe.
Most people passed him without a second glance. Every morning, as the sun rose over the East Bridge district, an aging man in a faded navy jumpsuit walked slowly down Magnolia Avenue. His back curved slightly from years of mopping floors and carrying trash bags heavier than most people realized. His left knee clicked each time he took the curb. His shoes were permanently stained from bleach, oil, and time. His name was Samuel Eli Carter, though almost nobody used it. To the staff at Weston Ridge Community High, he was simply Sam the janitor. To the students, if they noticed him at all, he was the old guy with the mop. He didn't mind the names. What hurt were the non-names, the glances that passed through him as if he were air. At 61 years old, Samuel had become an expert in invisibility. He didn't seek attention. He didn't speak unless spoken to. Every movement he made, slow, careful, quiet, was chosen not to disturb. His co-workers sometimes joked that Sam was quiet as dust. Dust, he thought, was fitting. Dust settled everywhere. Dust covered forgotten things. Dust didn't complain. The school itself wasn't glamorous. Weston Ridge served a patch of the city often ignored by the rest. The paint peeled from old brick walls. Some classrooms still had wooden desks etched with initials from the 1970s. The heating system rattled on cold days. The AC sputtered on hot ones. But to Samuel Carter, it was sanctuary. He wasn't always alone. He wasn't always invisible. Life wasn't always small. Once, he had been a husband. Once, he had been a father. Once, he dreamed of becoming a high school literature teacher. But life had a way of stacking losses until a man grew silent under the weight. The dreams left first, then the confidence, then the laughter, then the people. And so he swept. He mopped. He fixed leaky pipes, patched walls, unclogged toilets, locked up gyms, and wiped down cafeteria tables. And he survived. But beneath the silence was a truth even Samuel couldn't deny. He remembered everyone. No one remembered him. And that was beginning to ache in ways sweeping couldn't fix. Weston Ridge sat at the corner of a city trying not to collapse under its own history. Once a thriving industrial hub, East Bridge District had become a patchwork of abandoned factories, pawn shops, laundromats, and churches trying to fill the gaps. The school was the heart of the district, worn, bruised, but stubbornly beating. Mornings started early, too early, at 4:45 a.m., when the streetlights still hummed and the sky was a slate blue bruise. Samuel arrived. He carried a ring of keys that jingled like wind chimes. He'd unlock the main entrance, disarm the ancient alarm, and inhale the strange mixture of cafeteria grease, chalk dust, and old textbooks. He liked the silence before the school woke. It gave him time to think. And thinking was something he did too much of. He swept the hallways slowly, methodically, as sunlight crept through the second-floor windows. He wiped motivational posters. Believe in yourself. You matter. Every day is a new chance. The irony didn't escape him. Students began to trickle in by 7:15. Some nodded politely. Most rushed past. A handful left messes without a second thought. Crumpled wrappers, spilled juice, muddy footprints tracked across the tiles he'd just finished cleaning. Teachers often walked by deep in conversation about lesson plans, state requirements, district funding cuts, the latest fight, or the new administration policy. Sometimes someone would say, "Oh, morning, Sam." And he cherished those small acknowledgments, tiny lifelines in a vast ocean of anonymity. His favorite time of day, though, wasn't morning. It was after school, when the building emptied and the echoes softened. The hallways grew still. He could hear the hum of the vending machine. He could think without interruption. And sometimes, he'd sit in an empty classroom and read leftover books from the shelves. He still loved stories. They made him feel less alone. But if Weston Ridge was his sanctuary, it was also his cage. He never went out with coworkers. He always turned down invitations. He didn't attend school events. He avoided anything that involved emotion. Fear, he knew, had many forms. His was simple. Attachment. Attachment meant risk. Risk meant pain. And he had lived through enough pain to last a lifetime. Samuel's apartment was 2 blocks from the school, in a building whose paint flaked like dandruff. His unit, 3B, was small, 1 bedroom, 1 sink that dripped, and 1 window that looked out at a parking lot behind a laundromat. It wasn't much, but it was enough for him. Inside were 3 things he truly cared about. A framed photo of his wife, Evelyn, laughing on a lakeside pier. A crayon drawing from his daughter, Lily, from years ago. A cardboard box of old lesson plans, the ones he'd written before everything fell apart. That box was his deepest wound. He once believed he would teach. He once believed he could inspire. He once believed he was meant for more. Until the accident. Until he got the phone call. Until he heard the words no husband or father should ever hear. The drunk driver who hit them never received a long sentence. Their car caught fire before help arrived. Evelyn and Lily were gone before he reached the hospital. And so was Samuel's future. He lost his job at the publishing warehouse weeks later. He fell behind on bills. He pulled away from everyone who tried to help. Eventually, he took the first job he could find. Janitor. Permanent night shift. No questions asked. No interaction necessary. No vulnerability required. His grief was his companion. His loneliness, his punishment. And the school? It was the only place where silence didn't hurt quite as much. He kept his head down. He kept his heart shut. He kept going. But the universe has a way of shaking men who refuse to rise. And that shake was coming. In the form of a student he never expected. Her name was Marisol Vega, a quiet sophomore with tangled curls, tired eyes, and a backpack held together by duct tape. She noticed things other students didn't. She heard things others ignored. Because she, too, lived between worlds, seen but unseen, present but overlooked. One afternoon, as Samuel mopped the hallway outside the cafeteria, he heard sobbing. Soft, muffled, coming from the girls' restroom. He hesitated. Janitors learned to stay out of certain things. But something in the sound tugged at him. The crying grew harder. He knocked gently on the doorframe. Hello? You okay in there? Silence. Then a shaky whisper. I'm fine. Please just go. He recognized the voice. Marisol, the girl who always ate lunch alone on the courtyard steps. He didn't move. Didn't enter. Just stayed near the door and said quietly, Look, I've been fine before. And it usually meant I wasn't. A pause. Then the stall door creaked open, just a little. Her eyes were red, puffy, scared. Everything's messed up, she choked. Just leave me alone. Sam nodded. Okay, but I'll be right outside. In case you don't want to be alone. He stepped into the hallway, leaning on his mop. He didn't go far. He didn't disappear. Minutes passed. Then Marisol came out. She didn't say anything, not at first. But she stood there, staring at him, breathing unevenly. You don't even know me, she said. I don't need to, he replied. That was the first moment someone truly saw someone else. 2 invisible souls recognizing each other against the noise of the world. She told him only a sliver. School was hard. Home was worse. She felt invisible. He didn't push for details. You're not invisible, he said softly. She wiped her face. Neither are you. The words hit him like a shockwave. Neither are you. He didn't realize how deeply he needed to hear that. From that moment forward, something shifted. Not much. Just a spark. But sparks have a way of spreading. And soon, Samuel Carter, the man nobody saw, would be at the center of a storm that would change the school, the community, and lives beyond counting. He didn't know it yet, but kindness was coming, and it would start with him. After finishing another quiet, unnoticed shift at 11:47 p.m., Samuel Ortiz pushed open the back door of Crestfall Elementary. The cold wind cut across his face, but he didn't flinch. He rarely did. Not at cold, not at loneliness, not at exhaustion. Life had thrown him far worse. His walk home always followed the same route. 3 blocks past the shuttered bakery, 2 blocks past the mechanic shop that once belonged to a friend, and then a long road that sloped downward toward the old Riverside apartments. At night, it felt like walking through a photograph of a town abandoned by hope. Streetlights flickered, old posters peeled from brick walls. A stray dog trotted past, more wary than wild. Samuel kept his head down, his hands buried in the fraying pockets of his navy blue jacket. He looked like any other tired night shift worker. But inside his mind, inside his memory, he carried a lifetime of storms no one would ever guess from a glance. He had once been a man people listened to, a man people depended on, a father with a house full of laughter, a small business with proud customers, a marriage built on devotion. But tragedy, like a relentless tide, had stripped him of almost all of it. Almost. Except for the one thing he still clung to as if it were breath itself. Kindness. Not the loud kind. Not the performative kind. Not the kind meant for applause. But the quiet kind. The kind that asks for nothing, expects nothing, and still chooses to show up. Even on nights like this, when he arrived at the apartment to find the building half dark because the landlord still hadn't fixed the wiring. Even when he opened his mailbox and saw another bill stamped with overdue in red. Even when he looked in the mirror and saw a man worn down by years of heartbreak, but still trying to offer softness to a world that rarely offered it back. Samuel believed in kindness the way some people believed in religion. Not because life had been kind to him, but because he knew what happened when kindness disappeared. He had lived through that disappearance. And he was determined, quietly, stubbornly, that no child in Crestfall would have to. Crestfall wasn't always the kind of place where hope felt like a visitor instead of a resident. Once, long before factory closures, drug epidemics, and the slow decay of small towns everywhere, Crestfall had been a community with pride. It still had fragments of that pride. Old-timers who swept their porches every morning, a few shopkeepers who waved to kids as they biked past, volunteers who hosted monthly food drives in a parking lot by the river. But most days, the town felt suspended between what it used to be and what it feared it was becoming. And the children felt it most. That's why Samuel stayed at Crestfall Elementary, even though the pay was low and the hours unforgiving. Because schools hold what towns forget, the future. Every hallway he swept belonged to a child who might need someone who noticed them. Every lunch table he cleaned belonged to kids who might be hiding hunger, fear, or loneliness. Every classroom he unlocked at dawn belonged to tomorrow. Samuel never said it out loud, not to the principal, not to the teachers, not even to himself. But he had made a private vow. As long as he was alive, he would leave every corner of that school better than he found it. Better, cleaner, kinder, even if no one saw him do it. Especially if no one saw him do it. Samuel's apartment was small, 1 bedroom, a kitchenette with a stubborn stove, a living room with secondhand furniture, but it was clean. Impossibly clean. He kept it that way not because he cared about appearances, but because order gave him peace. On his fridge were 3 things. A photo of his daughter, taken when she was 12. A birthday card she sent him last year. And a quote he'd written on a scrap of paper. The world doesn't need you to be extraordinary. Just useful, where you are. Every night, when he came home sore from hours of scrubbing, lifting, repairing, and hauling, he read that quote again. He whispered it like a ritual. He didn't need to be extraordinary. Just useful. Useful was enough. Or so he thought. Because soon, very soon, Samuel's quiet usefulness would ignite something far bigger than he ever imagined. Something that would ripple across the school, across the town, across hundreds of lives. And all because of one moment, one choice, one act of kindness no one expected. The moment that turned the janitor nobody saw into the man who changed everything. There are moments in a man's life that fracture him so deeply the pieces never fit the same way again. For Samuel Ortiz, that moment began with a phone call. It had been 8 years ago, long before the janitor's keys and long before poverty became an unwanted roommate in his life. Back then, he owned a small carpentry shop called Ortiz and Son, a name he had chosen long before he ever had a son, because he believed in dreaming ahead of reality. The shop smelled of sawdust, pine, and fresh beginnings. He employed 2 workers, kept the books clean, and took evening classes to become certified in custom woodworking. He wasn't rich, he didn't care to be. He wanted stability, dignity, and time with his daughter, Isabella. But on a rainy night in late October, while driving home from a delivery, he made a mistake that would swallow him whole. He answered a text. Just one, just long enough to drift slightly, just enough for a truck to hydroplane around a bend. He survived. The other driver did not. The court ruled it an accident. The family of the victim eventually forgave him. But Samuel never forgave himself. His business failed. His marriage dissolved. His daughter, his bright, beautiful Isabella, stopped calling for a while because she didn't know how to talk to a father who barely recognized himself. Every day after the accident felt like waking up inside a punishment he believed he deserved. But the world didn't end. It simply got smaller, darker, and quieter. Why kindness became his religion. Most people, when they fall, cling to something. Faith, work, painkillers, anger. Samuel clung to kindness. Not because he was naturally gentle, not because he was noble, but because after watching a life vanish right in front of him, he realized something that rewired him forever. His existence had weight. Choices had consequences, even tiny ones, especially tiny ones. A kind word, a helpful gesture, a moment of patience, a simple act of noticing someone who felt invisible. He couldn't undo the worst moment of his life, but he could make sure his presence in the world never harmed anyone again. And so kindness became his discipline, his atonement, his quiet attempt at redemption. But redemption has a strange way of circling back when you least expect it. And for Samuel, that circle was already forming. Ms. Veronica Caldwell was the kind of principal people whispered about, not because she was cruel, but because she was impossible to impress. Tall, sharp-eyed, always in a deep navy suit, she walked the halls like a general guarding her troops. She noticed everything, every broken tile, every late staff member, every student who walked differently than they walked yesterday. So she noticed Samuel. She noticed how he arrived before dawn, long before his shift officially began. How he stayed after everyone left, even though no one paid him overtime. How the school felt calmer when he was around. How the kids, especially the troubled ones, always seemed drawn to him even though he never tried to draw attention. And most importantly, she noticed something else. He carried sorrow like a shadow. Most people ignored it. But Veronica Caldwell never ignored anything. Late one evening, as Samuel was repairing the door hinge on classroom 3B, she stood in the doorway and watched him work. He didn't notice her at first. He rarely noticed when someone was observing him. "You work like the world is watching you," she said. Samuel jumped, nearly dropping the screwdriver. "Oh, sorry, Principal Caldwell. Didn't see you there." "I know," she replied. He didn't understand what she meant. "You're thorough," she said. "Painfully so." That kind of thoroughness always comes from one of 2 places. Samuel hesitated. Which places? Pride or guilt? The words hit him with a force he didn't expect. He tried to smile. "Maybe a little of both." "Maybe," she said softly. "But you should know this school is better because of you." She walked away before he could respond, leaving him staring at the doorway, unsure why her words felt like someone had placed a warm hand on a long frozen wound. Crestfall Elementary might have looked ordinary. Painted lockers, noisy lunchrooms, posters peeling at the corners, but inside its walls lived stories adult eyes failed to see. Children who pretended they weren't hungry. Children who stayed late to avoid going home. Children who wanted someone, anyone, to say, "I notice you." Samuel noticed all of them. Not intentionally, not invasively, just naturally. The way someone who has felt unseen notices others who are invisible. He swept hallways slowly when he saw a child crying quietly at her locker. He fixed the broken drinking fountain because he overheard a boy say he was embarrassed to drink water that sprayed sideways. He donated part of his check each month to the school pantry, anonymously, and when no one was around, he replaced broken pencils in classrooms so every child would have one. The teachers thought the supplies came from the district. The district thought the teachers bought them. Only Samuel knew the truth. His kindness was deliberate, invisible, and constant, and it mattered far more than he understood. Because soon, very soon, one child's hidden struggle would collide with Samuel's past in a way that neither of them saw coming. And that collision would become the spark that changed everything. His name was Jordan Malik, a quiet 11-year-old with eyes too old for his age and shoulders that carried more than any child ever should. He wasn't a troublemaker. He wasn't a prodigy. He wasn't the loudest kid in class or the teacher's favorite. He was something far more common and far more dangerous. A child who learned to disappear. Jordan mastered invisibility the way other kids mastered video games. He knew how to blend into crowds, how to walk silently, how to keep his face blank so no one could read his fear. The school staff thought he was shy. His classmates thought he was boring. His teachers thought he was quiet but capable. Only Samuel thought differently. He recognized the way the boy's eyes flinched at sudden noises, the way he hesitated before taking free lunch, looking around as if expecting someone to judge him, the way he clutched his backpack like it contained his entire world. Because Samuel once held grief the same way. It happened on a Thursday morning. Rain hammered the school roof like relentless fingers tapping, testing the building's strength. Kids rushed into classrooms, dripping and laughing, shaking water from their jackets. Samuel was in the north hallway, mopping up the wet footprints so no one would slip. That's when he heard it. Not a scream, not a cry, just a sharp, muffled thud, like someone had fallen against metal. He turned just in time to see Jordan stumbling away from the boys' restroom, trying hard not to show the pain. Two older boys exited behind him, snickering, exchanging fist bumps. Bullying. The kind that doesn't make noise. The kind that doesn't leave obvious marks. The kind adults always miss. Samuel's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in recognition. He walked over slowly, gently, as if approaching a frightened animal. "Hey, you okay?" he asked. Jordan nodded immediately, too quickly, like the nod was armor. "Just slipped," the boy whispered. "Floor's wet." But the floor wasn't wet. Samuel's mop hadn't reached that section yet. He didn't push, didn't interrogate, didn't force eye contact. He simply crouched slightly, kept his voice soft. "I'm here if you ever need help. Just so you know." Jordan blinked, confused by the offer. Adults usually demanded explanations. Samuel didn't. Adults usually wanted to fix things immediately. Samuel didn't. Adults usually walked away. Samuel didn't. At least, not until Jordan nodded again. But that tiny moment, that tiny conversation, created a small crack in the walls the boy had built. A crack Samuel didn't realize he had opened. A crack that would change both their lives. The next major sign came a week later. It was nearly 6 p.m., after hours cleaning, and the sky outside the classroom windows had already faded to indigo. Most staff had gone home, but Samuel was still working, humming quietly as he vacuumed. That's when he saw it. A backpack. Jordan's backpack. Left under a desk. Students didn't normally forget belongings. Not kids like Jordan, who clung to that bag like it was life support. Samuel hesitated. He didn't want to invade the boy's privacy. But a school safety policy required janitorial staff to check unclaimed bags after hours. So, carefully, gently, he unzipped the small front pocket. Inside were a half-full packet of crackers, an inhaler, a small spiral notebook, a folded flyer from a homeless shelter, a bruised apple, and a photograph of Jordan and a woman, likely his mother, smiling in a way that felt old. Too old, like happiness frozen in time before life took something from them. Samuel inhaled sharply. Not pity, recognition. He knew what it meant to live on scraps of hope. He knew the look of fear disguised as silence. He knew the weight of hiding pain because revealing it was dangerous. He zipped the backpack shut with trembling hands. This boy was in trouble, real trouble, and no one else saw it, except him. The next morning, Miss Caldwell found Samuel standing outside her office, looking troubled. She raised an eyebrow. "You look like a man about to confess to a crime." Samuel gave a weak smile. "Nothing that dramatic. I just think one of the students might need help." That caught her attention instantly. "Who?" she asked. He hesitated. He didn't want to betray Jordan's privacy, but he also knew silence could cost the boy dearly. "Jordan Malik," he said softly. Caldwell's expression shifted. Surprise, concern, curiosity. She gestured for him to follow her into the office. "What makes you think Jordan needs help?" she asked. Samuel described only what he had seen. The bullies, the apparent fear, the forgotten backpack, the shelter flyer. He left out the notebook. The photo. Those felt too personal, things he had no right to expose. When he finished, Caldwell leaned back in her chair, thoughtful. "We've had reports from his last school," she said carefully. "Instability at home. A mother who's trying but struggling. A father not in the picture. Some housing insecurity." Samuel's chest tightened. "So it's true," he whispered. Caldwell nodded. "We monitor situations like these, but kids hide things well. Too well." She paused, studying him. "You care a lot about this boy." It wasn't a question. Samuel looked down. "Someone once cared about me when I didn't deserve it. Just returning the favor." Caldwell didn't respond for nearly 10 seconds. Then she said something that would stay with him for years. "You're not just a janitor, Samuel. You're a lifeline. Don't forget that." The next week was calm on the surface, but Samuel could sense something brewing underneath. Jordan's clothes were more wrinkled. He smelled faintly of cigarette smoke, not his own, but someone who lived near him. He seemed tired, jumpy, distractible. On Thursday afternoon, as the school emptied and dusk painted the sky orange, Samuel saw Jordan slip behind the cafeteria. Alone, carrying something. A bag. A very small bag. Too small to be a lunch. Too purposeful to be discarded. Samuel's heartbeat quickened. Was the boy running away? Stealing food? Hiding something? Scared of going home? He followed. Carefully, quietly, giving the child space but keeping him within sight. Jordan stopped behind the dumpsters, knelt, and opened the bag. Samuel stepped closer. What he saw made his stomach twist. Inside were clothes, a toothbrush, and a note that said, "If it gets worse, this is Plan B." Jordan wasn't running away. Jordan was preparing to. And right there, in the cold shadow of the cafeteria dumpsters, Samuel realized something that would define everything that came next. If he didn't intervene now, this child's life could break the way his own once did. He couldn't let that happen. Not again. Not to someone else. Not if he could stop it. That moment, quiet, fragile, terrifying, was the spark that lit the fuse of everything that followed. It was a Friday evening, cold, brittle, the kind of night where the wind scraped at the windows like it was trying to get inside. School had ended hours earlier. Most teachers were already home. The halls were dark except for the soft hum of exit signs. But Samuel stayed late, as he usually did. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. Quiet buildings reminded him of libraries, or churches, places where thoughts felt sacred. Around 7 p.m., he saw Ms. Caldwell leave. "Don't stay too late," she said warmly. "Just finishing up," he replied. She waved and disappeared into the rain-soaked parking lot. 10 minutes later, the building felt like it was breathing. Lights flickered out one by one. The last bus rumbled away from the corner. And that was when Samuel heard it. Not dramatic, not loud, just a tiny, fragile sound. A sneeze. A child's sneeze. From somewhere in the dark. Samuel froze. Students were long gone. Teachers were gone. The building should have been empty. He switched off his vacuum, listening. Another sound. A faint cough. Then a sniffle. With slow, steady steps, he followed the noise toward the East Wing storage rooms, a place students rarely used and staff rarely entered. The hallway lights flickered. Rain pattered against narrow windows. The air felt thin, like the building was holding its breath. He approached the storage door, put his hand on the handle, listened. Silence. Then, in a whisper so quiet he almost missed it, "Please don't." Samuel's heart dropped. It was Jordan. He opened the door gently, letting the light spill in. And there, curled between stacked boxes and old desk chairs, was the boy, wearing the same clothes as yesterday, clutching that backpack like a shield, face pale from exhaustion, eyes red from crying. He flinched when he saw Samuel. "Please, don't call anybody," Jordan gasped, voice shaking. "I'll leave. I promise. Just, please, don't tell them where I was." Samuel knelt slowly. "Jordan, are you hiding?" The boy nodded. A tiny nod. A nod full of fear. "I can't go home," he whispered. "Not tonight." Samuel didn't speak, didn't push, didn't demand answers. He just sat on the cold floor beside the boy until the silence felt safe enough for words. Jordan pulled his backpack closer. "My uncle came back," he finally said. Samuel felt a chill crawl over him. "The one that," he began. Jordan nodded hard. "My mom tries to keep him away. But he found us. He gets angry. Really angry. Tonight he broke the door. He threw a bottle at her. It hit the wall right by my head." Samuel clenched his fists to keep from shaking. "Your mom, is she okay?" he asked quietly. Jordan's face crumpled. "She told me to hide in the closet. Then she yelled at him to leave me alone. She never yells. Ever. I got scared he'd hurt her because of me. So when he wasn't looking, I ran out the back." Samuel's breath caught. "How did you get here?" "I walked. Through the rain." "But why here?" Samuel asked, voice barely above a whisper. Jordan wiped his nose on his sleeve. "Because this is the only place where I don't feel scared." Samuel swallowed. Hard. This wasn't just bullying. This wasn't just poverty. This wasn't just instability. This was a child running from violence. And he'd run straight to the only adult who'd ever made him feel safe. Samuel knew the rules. School staff weren't allowed to transport students off campus. They weren't allowed to take them home. They weren't allowed to handle situations like this alone. The official response would be clear. Call the police. Call Child Protective Services. Let the system handle it. But Samuel also knew something else. Systems often failed kids like Jordan. They got shuffled, ignored, misdiagnosed, separated from the one parent who loved them. And tonight of all nights, Samuel trusted his heart more than a handbook. He took a slow breath. "Listen to me," he said gently. "You're not in trouble, and you don't have to be alone." Jordan's lip trembled. Can I stay here tonight?" he asked softly. "Just for tonight. I'll sleep in the corner. I won't make any noise." The desperation in the boy's voice cracked something inside Samuel. He knew the risks. He knew the consequences. But he also knew this child desperately needed safety. Right now. This moment. Not in 3 hours after paperwork or tomorrow after evaluations. So he made a decision. One that would shape everything that came after. "Come on," Samuel said. "Get your bag. You're coming with me." Jordan froze. "With you?" Samuel nodded. "Just until we figure things out." Jordan didn't move at first. Didn't trust it. Couldn't believe it. And then, slowly, carefully, he stood. "Okay," he whispered. Just one word. But it changed both their fates. They walked through the back exit so no one would see. Jordan held close to Samuel's side, like a small, frightened shadow. Outside, the rain had softened to a mist. Streetlights flickered in puddles. Cars hissed by in the distance. Samuel unlocked the passenger door of his aging Honda, opened it, and placed a towel on the seat. "Hop in." Jordan hesitated, then climbed in, hugging his backpack. Samuel started the engine. The windshield wipers scraped across glass, revealing a blurry city stretching into darkness. And as they pulled out of the parking lot, Samuel caught a glimpse of Jordan in the rearview mirror. The boy wasn't crying. wasn't shaking. He was just breathing. For the first time that night, he looked like a child again, not a survivor. And Samuel, gripping the wheel tightly, whispered to himself, "I won't let the world break him." He didn't know how. He didn't know what consequences were coming. He only knew one thing. Tonight, he would fight for Jordan the way no one fought for him. The winter that followed was the harshest in nearly 2 decades. New Lock's River froze so solid that children skated on it during the mornings, and by nightfall, the temperatures dipped so low that even the streetlights buzzed with icy static. For most residents, winter meant cozy homes, heaters, warm coats, and fireplaces. But for those on the fringes, people like the ones Elias knew all too well, winter was a quiet predator. Elias worked longer hours that season. He pretended it was to earn overtime, but deep down, he knew the truth. He feared going home. The silence of his tiny basement apartment reminded him too much of all the silences he had fled, the quiet after a beating, the quiet after his father's drinking rages, the quiet of an orphanage bed where no one tucked him in. So he stayed at the school. Nights blurred into early mornings as he mopped the same floors twice, repaired things that weren't broken, polished railings that already gleamed, just to keep moving, just to stay out of the silence. But those nights also introduced him to people he might never have noticed otherwise. Calvin, the night security guard, was a man of few words. His heavy boots echoed down the hallway like a slow, tired drum. He greeted Elias every night with a nod and a gruff, "Evening." For months they exchanged nothing more. One night, Elias found Calvin sitting on a bench in the courtyard, staring at his phone with a trembling hand. "You all right?" Elias asked hesitantly. Calvin sniffed. "My son, he blocked me again." He chuckled dryly, but it wasn't humor, it was grief disguised as toughness. Elias sat beside him without a word. Calvin eventually confessed he had spent time in prison for assault when his daughter was little. He hadn't been violent toward her, but violence had been his closest friend for so long that it poisoned everything around him, including his marriage, his relationships, his sense of worth. His son wanted nothing to do with him. "I used to think second chances were only for heroes," Calvin admitted. "Not men like me." Elias stared at the frozen courtyard. "Second chances are for the ones who survived long enough to need them," he said quietly. That was the night their friendship began. It wasn't built on laughter or shared hobbies. It was built on understanding. Two men who had seen the worst of life and still chose to show up. In mid-January, long after most staff had gone home, Elias heard quiet sobbing from the auditorium. Curious and slightly worried, he slipped inside. There, illuminated by a single stage light, sat Mrs. Alvarez, the beloved literature teacher. Papers spilled around her like fallen leaves. She held her head in her hands, shoulders shaking. He hesitated. Approaching a crying teacher could easily get him scolded or misunderstood. But kindness isn't always safe. It's simply necessary. "Ms. Alvarez," he said softly. She inhaled sharply and looked up, embarrassed. "Oh, Mr. Brooks, I'm so sorry. I didn't think anyone was still here." He didn't ask what was wrong. Instead, he sat 3 rows behind her, giving her space. Sometimes proximity is comfort. Sometimes distance is respect. She eventually spoke. Her mother had been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. She had been juggling teaching, doctor appointments, paperwork, and fear. Fear that one day, her mother would look at her and see a stranger. "I feel helpless," she whispered. Elias nodded, his throat tight. "I know that feeling." She blinked, surprised. "You do?" So he told her, not everything, but enough. About the mother he barely knew. Her struggles, her warmth, her attempts to protect him from the storm of his father. And the day he lost her. They talked for hours. Through tears and laughter, they patched up pieces of their souls. Not perfectly, but gently. Before they parted, she hugged him. Quickly, awkwardly, sincerely. "You have no idea how much this helped me," she said. Elias smiled faintly. "That makes 2 of us." There was one more person Winter brought into his orbit, someone unexpected. A student. She appeared late one evening in the hallway, curled up beside the drinking fountain, hoodie pulled over her face. The school should have been empty. Elias approached cautiously. "You okay?" Her voice was muffled when she finally answered. "Didn't want to go home." He recognized the tone. He recognized the fear behind it. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Jada." She was 15, brilliant, quiet, and living with an uncle who treated her more like a burden than a child. Her home wasn't violent, not physically, but emotional neglect is its own brand of cruelty. Silence can bruise, too. Elias didn't pry. Instead, he offered her a warm drink from the teacher's lounge and sat nearby as she vented about grades, pressure, loneliness, dreams she wasn't sure she deserved to chase. Before she left, she asked him something unexpected. "Mr. Brooks, why are you so nice?" No student had ever asked him that. No adult, for that matter. He thought carefully. "Because when I was your age," he said slowly, "one kind person could have changed everything. And I don't ever want someone to say they didn't get that chance because I stayed quiet." Jada nodded. She understood more than a teenager should have to. By February, Elias began noticing changes. Subtle ones, quiet ones, the kind that grow slowly beneath the surface before the world recognizes them. Calvin now joined him for coffee every night at midnight. Their conversations, once stiff, blossomed into debates about music, sports, and childhood dreams. Mrs. Alvarez left handwritten thank you notes on his supply card, each with quotes from famous authors about courage and compassion. Students waved at him more. Teachers greeted him by name. The principal, who previously hadn't known he existed, started acknowledging him in staff meetings. But the biggest change was internal. The shame he had carried since childhood, heavy, suffocating, familiar, began to loosen its grip. Not disappear, but loosen. Elias felt something he hadn't felt since he was a boy sitting beside his mother on the steps of their old apartment. Hope, not for perfection, not for applause, but for possibility. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, the world didn't need him to be extraordinary to be meaningful. Maybe showing up was enough. Maybe kindness, even quiet kindness, was enough. He wasn't healed. He wasn't transformed. But he was changing. And sometimes, that's the beginning of everything. Stories like this remind us that extraordinary kindness exists all around us. If this touched your heart, please like this video. It helps more people discover these inspiring stories. Subscribe for more tales of human kindness that will restore your faith in humanity. And most importantly, look for opportunities in your own life to be someone's unexpected blessing. What act of kindness will you perform this week? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. And remember, you have the power to change someone's entire world.